crush Crawfish is a fucking nightmare, both in the image of a man-sized lobster and in the brutality of this segment. The dash is missed here as much as anywhere else in the game. 2 moments seem bluntly impossible without it at first glance, and the first of those 2 isn't remotely easy even when you do have the approach down. The stage itself isn't very eventful. There's a decently evil middle portion, but it's overall an incredibly short affair. No, this segment becomes hell solely because it's where we have to fight Vile. Vile's abandoned factory constitutes one of the most difficult sections of this entire challenge. There's so much necessity for both luck and precision involved here. During the first vertical climb, debris rains down upon X from above, and at no point during this are you safe from potential failure. There's simply no way to predict the debris. It follows no manipulable patterns. Altering the time you take, the positions you assume, they don't do a thing to lend any control over where it falls. Much like with Sting Chameleon from X1, you're entirely at the mercy of chance here. This wouldn't be terribly concerning if there were no real skill involved otherwise, but there are 2 jumps to be made at the top of this climb which define precision. They require nearly pixel-perfect timing to pull off, because both require X gaining full jump height, but are capped by roofing overhead. You literally need to brush these overhangs with X's helmet just to clear the gaps. A slight misfire up or down will gut X's momentum by hitting the ceiling or have him come up short. To make things worse, besides the strict placement, your window to catch the wall jump on the other side is almost as narrow, because you're clinging to the tips of very small outcrops. Believe me, those small things are much, much worse than they appeared. I have markers on the graphics of each wall to cue me in to when to jump, but even an unnoticeable deviation is going to cause your jumps to fail. To call these consistent is laughable. It's just not humanly feasible to accurately time these all the time, every time, or at least it's beyond me. You jump from your marker and you hope for the best. If you fail, too bad, try again. I could waste all the time in the world trying, except for the fact that you have bloody debris arbitrarily raining down on you during every attempt. Alone, I passed this point maybe once every 10 attempts. Overall, this entire segment took over 40, because there's the bonus of another fucking debris-laden climb on the escape from Vile's factory. To be fair, this sounds a lot more taxing than it was, because most of those so-called attempts were minute-long affairs that ended right there on the first climb. It's still a ludicrous thing. Oh, I ranted about this through half of Vile. Sorry. In case things were too complicated to pick up on, you jump, you win, the end. Outside of his embarrassingly downgraded ride armor, he ups the ante by requiring you to augment jumping by moving left and right from time to time. Luckily, X isn't a man-child and he can handle performing 2 basic functions at once, so Vile's master strategy is ruined somewhat. It paints a rather grim portrait of Doppler as a person. Why in the fuck would you resurrect and bestow X's old enemy with a chance for revenge by patchworking the poor bastard to hell and back, then throwing him a defective ride armor one of the foot soldiers got tired of using? What an asshole. And thus the Vile saga ends for another day until the next time his resurrection sounds like an interesting plot twist to Capcom. I'd love to show off his rematch, but altering the second Doppler stage through his early destruction is mandatory to even get through it at all. The escape sequence is a very tight affair with X as slow as he is, and there's no room for hesitating. Oh, and look, those green fuckers finally serve a halfway sensible point. Take a snapshot, it won't happen again. I absolutely hate this entire sequence. Destroying the green barriers without letting them rise requires precise firing, and there's this lovely climb where I'm at the mercy of luck yet again. There's nothing to do but hurry your ass to the top and try not to concoct heart failure through anticipation. Even the final little stretch is miserable. You can afford to fail one, but certainly not all 3 of the tricky jumps across each bridge. A 6-second leeway for error in this sequence is not nearly as generous as it might seem. I'm not entirely out of the woods yet. There's an upcoming gap, the first of its kind, where the distance is impossible to cover by means of a basic jump. There aren't any workarounds through weapon use, through allowing an armor, nothing. The only sensible solution is to dash. It's not even close, you're painfully unable to make it. But of course, there's a sideshow to make it possible. Yeah. I have no fucking idea how I missed this property throughout all of my testing. It was eventually pointed out to me that there's a quality to the character switch system I'd never noticed before, principally because Zero was an unwieldy piece of shit and I never use him. The way that works is exactly like the pause glitch from way back in the golden years with Mega Man 2. Switching characters resets your jump in midair. You can do this twice through switching both to Zero and back again, and it's just enough to cover the few jumps in the game too wide for no dashing. You can only use it once per level too, so the fact that it covers all bases is just uncannily lucky. That gap ended the challenge for me for a long time. I concluded it is impossible and had planned to just use the minimum amount of dashing necessary. Loads of thanks go to the user Mr. Weird Guy for finding this shit for me in the first place. It salvaged the whole challenge. I promise you, there's far more sincerity in that statement than my inability to convey proper emotion can show. The only thing left to deal with after all this is crushed Crawfish, who as you can tell, isn't exactly a strong argument for lobster intelligence. Somehow, I feel I'll cope with the guilt of boiling one of those fuckers up tonight. It's a goddamn good thing Crawfish has the most exploitable pattern in the game, and that the rest of his stage wasn't a terrible issue either. Making it through Vile's factory happens so rarely you are on an adrenaline rush for the rest of the attempt, which makes stupid mistakes very common. By someone's blessing, I made it through everything else on my first successful run of the factory. Yeah, 40 plus attempts just to get through that. I don't know what the fuck I would have done if I'd taken a hit from Crawfish somehow. Probably toss in some throwaway comment about denouncing a religion of sorts, I suppose for what would appear to listeners to be the 10th time in a month, but hey, I never said I was the poster child for originality just because I like to bitch about it. That concludes what's easily one of the most troublesome segments. Next up is Vault Catfish, who is also incredibly troublesome without the generosity of throwing all the issues at the very start of the segment, so suffer with me.